In the late 1850s, Courbet continued to work in France, in spite of the severe criticism he constantly faced. For many, he was the undisputed model for a new generation of painters who had turned away from the traditional schools of painting that they deemed as barriers to artistic inspiration. Courbet worked in all genres, and he executed admirable portraits, noted for his adept technique of capturing a likeness. In January 1865, the sudden death of the socialist philosopher Pierre-Joseph Proudhon stirred Courbet to paint a tribute to his fellow Franche-Comtois, whom he had known since his late 20s. Proudhon was a politician and founder of mutualist philosophy. He was the first person to declare himself an anarchist, and is widely regarded as one of the ideology's most influential theorists. He became a member of the French Parliament after the Revolution of 1848, when he referred to himself as a federalist. Proudhon favored workers' associations or cooperatives as well as individual worker-peasant possession over private ownership or the nationalization of land and workplaces. Still, he considered social revolution to be achievable in a peaceful manner. Courbet was a great admirer of Proudhon's achievements and was noticeably upset when the socialist leader passed away. To a friend, the artist wrote, "The 19th century has lost its pilot and the man it has produced." No doubt Proudhon's philosophy of democracy and human progress, influenced by the thinking of Charles Fourier, were important to the radical Courbet. Proudhon's anti-authoritarian stance led to his imprisonment and exile, though it won him the devotion of a disciple in Courbet, who overlooked his friend's moralistic and indeed Philistine views on art. For many years, the artist had wanted to produce a portrait of the socialist, but he was an unwilling sitter and always managed to avoid agreeing to the numerous requests. Therefore, Courbet had to write to another friend in Paris, asking him to send over several photographs of Proudhon to aid him with his projected portrait. In the letter, Courbet describes the wish to produce a monument for his mentor, which would rise above the crowds. The scene depicted is of the philosopher in 1853, 12 years before the canvas was begun, as shown by the date inscribed on a step to the left. PJP 1853. Courbet likely selected this year as it was when La Philosophie du Progrès, one of Proudhon's most seminal books, was published and duly banned. Courbet presents Proudhon as a life-sized figure in a domestic setting, relaxing on the back steps of his unassuming house, while watching his two daughters at play. Proudhon wears a workman's tunic and simple hat, though his books and writing materials confirm his status as a man of letters. His thoughtful expression adds to the complicated mixture of working-class artisan and intellectual. Courbet would have appreciated how the socialist's family, like his own, had progressed in social standing through their industry and merits. Courbet has not chosen to present Proudhon as a bohemian figure, but instead as the father figure of his own family, attended by his daughters. One girl is learning her alphabet, while the other is content to play with teacups and a pitcher, signaling their contrasting natures. Originally, Courbet had included the figure of Madame Proudhon, seated on the chair and noticeably pregnant. However, when the painting was exhibited at the Salon of 1865, the widow objected to her presentation, and Courbet had to remove her from the painting. Now, the absent mother is represented by the sewing basket and a pile of linen on the empty chair. Completed in 1866, Le Sommeil is one of Courbet's most erotic paintings, depicting a scene of lesbianism. The provocative canvas was commissioned by the Turkish diplomat and art collector of the late Ottoman era, Halil Sherif Pasha, who had lived in Paris since 1860. Pasha had given up the life of a diplomat, choosing instead the role of a bon vivant and grand art collector. He amassed an incredible body of French artworks, including Ingres's famous Turkish bath. Le Sommeil is believed to have been inspired by Charles Baudelaire's poem Delphine et Hippolyte from his collection Les Fleurs du Mal. Held today in the collection of the Petit Palais, the canvas portrays two naked women lying asleep on a bed entwined in an erotic embrace, appearing to rest after sexual intercourse. The bedroom is decorated with various textiles and ornamental furnishings, adding to the exoticism. In the background, there is a dark blue velvet curtain, and in the right corner a table with a decorative flower suggests splendor. In the foreground, there are three items positioned on a small wooden table: a colored flacon, a small vessel, a transparent crystal vase, and a cup. The broken string of pearls serves as a symbol for unbridled passion. Except for these few furnishings, there is nothing to overshadow the focal point of the image, the erotic pose of the women, which seizes our attention. The women's flesh is replicated with a shimmering light, blending with the varied palette of whites and pinks of the surrounding fabrics. One of the women is a redhead, while the other is brunette. The contrast stresses that these lovers are two women, with no suggestion of a man present. The sinuous curves of their limbs and bodies are denoted with separate lines, accentuating their acts of love. The painting achieved such a scandal that it was not permitted to be shown publicly until 1988. Indeed, when Le Sommeil was first exhibited by a picture dealer in 1872, it became the subject of a police report. By that time, Khalil Bey had been financially ruined and was forced to sell his collection. Courbet was subsequently denounced for his moral turpitude. One of the models for the painting was Joanna Heffernan, who was the mistress of fellow painter James Abbott Whistler. Whistler's relationship with Heffernan ended soon afterwards, and he was very unhappy with Courbet for including her in his composition. Such an explicit depiction of an erotic relationship between two women had not occurred in the tradition of high art prior to Courbet's Le Sommeil. Despite its public ban, it would have an immense impact on the course of 19th century erotic art, as numerous artists were influenced by the theme of lesbian couples. In time, repetition of the theme helped to lower the taboos associated with these subjects. Courbet's paintings of the 1850s had striven to elevate the provincial people of his country as serious subjects for art. Now he was trying to do the same for homosexuals, whom society customarily judged as wicked and vile. Although it is true that Courbet painted the canvas for the enjoyment of a male, it still stands a powerful example of challenging society's prohibited views on sexuality. The artist had once more metamorphosed a subject previously held as vulgar and proscribed into a piece of astonishing artistry. A lover of women, Courbet liked to glorify the female nude in paintings of stunning warmth and sensuality. L'Origine du Monde is one of the most provocative and intimate depictions of the female nude in the history of Western art. The canvas was completed in 1866 and presents a close-up view of the genitals and abdomen of a naked woman as she lies on a bed with her legs open. The framing of the nude body, with head, arms, and lower legs outside of our view, emphasizes the eroticism of the painting with an unprecedented detailed view of the model's vagina. During the 19th century, the display of the nude body underwent a revolution, chiefly inspired by the works of Courbet and Manet. The former rejected academic painting and its smooth, idealized nudes, preferring instead the more everyday depictions of real women in everyday life, not romanticized tales of fantasy. Courbet was appalled by the hypocritical social conventions of the Second Empire, where eroticism and even pornography were acceptable in mythological works. Courbet insisted he never lied in his paintings, and his pioneering realism pushed the limits of what was considered presentable. Even today, the graphic nudity of L'Origine du Monde, with its close picture plane to the viewer, still has the power to shock and trigger censorship. For years, art historians have speculated upon the identity of model, with many suggesting his favorite model, Joanna Heffernan, whose lover at the time was Whistler. She was the subject of a series of 4 portraits by Courbet entitled La Belle Irlandaise, Portrait of Jo, painted in 1865 or 66. The possibility that she was having an affair with Courbet might explain his subsequent bitter falling out with Whistler a short while later. Although Heffernan had noticeable red hair, contrasting with the darker pubic hair of L'Origine du Monde, the attribution of Heffernan as the model continues to be considered. In February 2013, the Courbet expert Jean-Jacques Fernier authenticated a painting of a young woman's head and shoulders as the upper section of L'Origine du Monde, which according to some was severed from the canvas. Fernier went on to announce that due to the conclusions reached after 2 years of analysis, the head will be added to the next edition of the Courbet Catalogue Raisonné. However, the Musée d'Orsay, where the painting is held, have indicated that L'Origine du Monde was not part of a larger work. Other documentary evidence links the painting with Constance Queneau, a former dancer at the Paris Opera and a mistress of the Ottoman diplomat Halil Sherif Pasha, who commissioned this painting as well as the previous featured plate. According to the historian Claude Chope and the head of the French National Library's Prints Department, Sylvie Aubenas, the evidence is found in correspondence between Alexandre Dumas-Fils and Georges Sand. Halil Sherif Pasha is believed to have commissioned the work shortly after he moved to Paris, after being introduced to Courbet by Charles-Augustin Sainte-Beuve. Pasha ordered a painting to add to his personal collection of erotic pictures, which already included the Turkish bath and the sleepers. After Pasha's finances were ruined by gambling, the painting passed through a series of private collections. It was first bought at the sale of the Pasha collection in 1868 by the dealer Antoine de Lanarde. Edmond de Goncourt then discovered it in an antique shop in 1889, hidden behind a wooden pane decorated with the painting of a castle in a snowy landscape. According to Robert Fernier, who published 2 volumes of the Courbet Catalogue Raisonné and founded the Musée Courbet, the Hungarian collector Baron Ferenc Hatvany bought the canvas at the Bernheim Jeune Gallery in 1910 and took it with him to Budapest. Towards the end of the Second World War, it was looted by Soviet troops, but later ransomed by Hatvany. When Hatvany left Hungary, During the communist takeover of 1947, he was permitted to take only one artwork with him to Paris, and he chose L'origine du monde. In 1955, the painting was sold at auction for 1.5 million francs to its new owner, the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. He and his wife, actress Sylvia Bataille, installed it in their country house in Guitrancourt. Lacan asked the artist André Masson, his stepbrother, to build a double-bottom frame and to draw another picture to accompany it, a surrealist, elusive version of the original work. The explicit nature of the painting has served as an inspiration to numerous artists. A satirical twist was provided by Marcel Duchamp's last major work, Étant donné, which also features the image of a woman lying on her back with her legs spread. In 1989, the French artist Orlan created the cibachrome L'origine de la guerre, the origin of war, a male version of the original, showing a penile erection. Brazilian artist Vic Muniz went on to produce two versions of the painting. The first is a photograph made of dust and dirt, which plays with the common moralist association between female genitalia and filth. In the second, the painting is constructed from an assemblage of journal clippings reminiscent of anatomic and artistic procedures. In La Femme au perroquet, Courbet presents a reclining nude rendered with the confident naturalism that defined his mature style. Exhibited at the Paris Salon of 1866, notably the first of his nudes the jury accepted, the painting balances academic polish with Courbet's signature earthiness. A young woman stretches languidly across rumpled white sheets, her hair loose and unruly, her garments abandoned at her side. Perched lightly on her raised hand is a green parrot, its wings half open as if caught in mid-flutter. Courbet paints her skin in smooth, luminous tones, echoing classical tradition, yet the intimate disorder of the scene, the tousled hair, the casually discarded clothing, subtly challenges the salon's expectations of decorum. The model is widely believed to be Joanna Hiffernan, Courbet's companion and frequent muse, whose presence anchors the composition with a quiet, sensuous self-assurance. The contrast between her relaxed pose and the bird's lively motion gives the work a playful, spontaneous energy unusual in conventional academic nudes. Though less provocative than Le Sommeil from the same year, La Femme au perroquet signaled Courbet's ability to navigate between official taste and his own realist convictions. Today it hangs in Gallery 811 of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where its mix of polish, immediacy, and understated rebellion continues to captivate viewers. In The Woman in the Waves, Gustave Courbet presents a striking and unidealized vision of the female nude, rendered with the artist's characteristic directness and material sensitivity. Emerging from a dark, turbulent sea, the woman lifts her arms above her head, her body illuminated by a cold, silvery light that heightens both her physical presence and her emotional ambiguity. She is neither mythological nor allegorical. She is simply a woman, raw and immediate, confronting the viewer with a gaze that feels both intimate and unreachable. Courbet's realism is unmistakable here. The texture of the skin, the wetness of the hair, and the weight of the rising waves all reveal his commitment to representing nature and the human body without embellishment. The sea is not a symbolic backdrop, but a living physical force that nearly engulfs her. In this tension between body and water, Courbet creates a moment suspended between vulnerability and power. The woman appears exposed, yet also elemental, as though she herself were born of the shifting tide. The composition is tightly framed, cutting away the horizon and focusing entirely on the immediacy of the form. This closeness intensifies the painting's emotional charge. The viewer is not simply observing, but drawn into the space where water, light, and flesh converge. Courbet's brushwork, earthy, tactile, and boldly confident, heightens this sense of embodied realism, offering a counterpoint to the sleek academic nudes favored in Paris at the time. Though not as provocative as some of Courbet's other works, The Woman in the Waves remains a powerful statement of his artistic convictions. It captures the essence of Courbet's vision, the world as it is, sensuous and unidealized, anchored in physical truth yet capable of profound emotional resonance. Painted around 1865, Jo the Beautiful Irishwoman belongs to a compact yet evocative series of 4 portraits created during Gustave Courbet's months in Trouville. These works portray Joanna Heffernan, the Irish model known for her vivid red hair and for her close artistic ties with James McNeill Whistler. The unusual use of her first name in the title marks a rare moment of familiarity and individuality in mid-19th century portraiture, situating the series within an intimate artistic triangle along the Normandy coast. Courbet had explored mirror motifs earlier in his career, but the Jo series represents a more personal, finely tuned development of the theme. Working alongside Whistler, he sharpened his attention to surface textures, light modulation, and the truthful rendering of flesh. The realism here is resolute, yet tender, avoiding idealization while focusing on Jo's palpable presence, her luminous skin, the rich tumble of her auburn hair, and the concentrated intelligence of her expression. Across the 4 canvases, Jo appears in 3/4 view before a mirror, creating a subtle conversation between viewer, sitter, and the reflected image. The pared-down background forces attention onto her form, highlighting Courbet's vigorous brushwork and the chromatic depth of her hair. The mirror serves not as a symbol of vanity but of self-awareness. Jo is portrayed as someone looking, thinking, occupying her own inner world rather than simply being looked at. Read this way, the series becomes a study of identity and agency in portraiture. By naming Jo outright and presenting her in a moment of introspection, Courbet challenges conventions that rendered women anonymous or purely ornamental. Her poised inward expression suggests autonomy, and the collaborative circumstances of the paintings underscore her role as more than a passive muse. She becomes a link between Courbet and Whistler, embodying a shared, realist pursuit. Dispersed today across several major museums, the Jo portraits stand as pivotal works in Courbet's portrait practice and in the broader evolution of 19th century figuration. They reveal how models could shape artistic vision and how realism could honor individuality without sentimentality. Their lasting appeal resides in that blend of intimacy and gravity, a clear, unembellished humanity that continues to draw modern viewers into Jo's quiet, compelling presence. The painting's journey mirrors its enduring significance. From Hinlopen's private collection, it passed through the Gilvink family, later entering Catherine the Great's holdings in St. Petersburg via the art dealer Gotskowski, eventually transferred to the Museum Rumyantsev in Moscow, and then to the Pushkin Museum in 1924, it remains one of the masterpieces of Rembrandt's late period. Critics often regard it as among the finest works of his final decade. A meditation on moral destiny rendered with unparalleled spiritual and psychological insight. In its restrained grandeur, Ahasuerus and Haman at the Feast of Esther stands as one of the most haunting achievements of Western art. Painted between 1869-1870, The Wave, or The Waves, belongs to Courbet's most intense and elemental explorations of the sea, created during his stays along the Normandy coast. These canvases emerged at a moment of personal upheaval and artistic transformation, marking a decisive turn toward landscape as a vehicle for raw, unmediated emotion. The timing coincides with widening political tensions and Courbet's own growing disillusionment, and these pressures seem to reverberate within the explosive surfaces of the sea. Courbet approached these seascapes with a realist conviction sharpened by direct observation. Working outdoors in stormy conditions, he rejected idealized marine traditions and instead sought the physical truth of the ocean, its weight, density, and motion. His method fused thick impasto with bold lateral strokes, creating surfaces that pulse with the energy of oncoming waves. This was realism pushed to its dramatic frontier. Nature not as backdrop, but as a force confronting the viewer head-on. The compositions are structurally simple, but psychologically charged. A massive wave dominates the canvas, rising like a dark wall of water suspended in mid-crash. The horizon is often reduced to a thin, trembling line beneath a turbulent sky, amplifying the sense of containment and impending impact. Courbet's palette deep greens, slate blues, frothy whites, creates a tactile sense of cold and weight. Light glances sharply across the crest of the wave, illuminating both its beauty and its threat. These formal decisions transform the ocean into a living protagonist, echoing the painter's own internal storms. Interpreted symbolically, the wave becomes more than a study of nature. It is a vision of sublimity grounded in realism, a confrontation between human fragility and the overwhelming power of the natural world. The absence of figures intensifies this confrontation, leaving the viewer alone before the surge. In this solitude, the sea becomes a mirror of emotional turmoil, unpredictable, immense, and uncontainable. Courbet's realism thus acquires a metaphysical dimension, revealing how closely observation and introspection can intertwine. Across their various versions, the waves hold a singular place in Courbet's legacy. They anticipate later developments in modern landscape painting, from the expressive coastlines of the Impressionists to the abstractions of early 20th century seascapes. Their immediacy and volatility demonstrate the full force of Courbet's late style, proving that realism could be both viscerally physical and profoundly psychological. Today, these paintings remain some of the most powerful images of the sea in 19th century art, resonating with a timeless sense of awe and confrontation. Etretat had attracted numerous painters to its coasts from the early 19th century, having earned the reputation of having reviving air and a certain quality of light. During his time in the area in the summer of 1869, Courbet stayed in a house by the sea, which was sheltered against the cliff on the left of the bay. He would paint varying scenes of Falaise d'Aval many times during his sojourn in the Normandy town. The following canvas, the Etretat Cliffs After the Storm, is one of the artist's most notable paintings during this productive phase of his career. The locality is famous for its characteristic formations of natural archways, produced in the high rocks by centuries of water and wind. The canvas presents a view of the arched escarpment known as Porte d'Aval, replicated with broad and daring brushstrokes. Great attention has been paid to the intricate formation of the cliffs and rocks, giving the natural formation the appearance of a grand architectural structure. Arranged as a complex structure of vertical clusters of rock and mossy growth, it evokes the impression of an ancient ruin. Located today in Musée d'Orsay, the painting is a pure, uncomplicated landscape with no sight of people, allowing our attention instead to focus upon the balance of land, rock, sea, and sky. It exudes a magisterial quality, conveyed through the transparent treatment of light, emanating from the sky, which is dominated by intricate cloud patterns. Courbet captures the bracing clarity of air, applying thinned and delicate color tones to represent the rejuvenated light following a storm. This attention to temporal effects communicates to us the cleaning power of nature. Courbet's close friend, the art critic Castagnari, who was a staunch advocate of realist art, lavished great praise on the canvas when it was first exhibited at the Salon of 1870. In particular, he admired the free, joyous air which circulates in the canvas and envelops the details. The painting won great acclaim at the exhibition and helped consolidate Courbet's reputation as one of the leading figures of art. In later years, the Impressionists revered Courbet's use of light and freedom, unprecedented for its time. Monet himself would visit the area and produce his own series of paintings, partly inspired by Courbet's work at Etretat. His reputation firmly established as an artist of wealth and fame, having recently produced some of his greatest work at Etretat, Courbet's career was nevertheless poised for a downward turn. Plagued by rheumatism and a worsening addiction to alcohol, he struggled to maintain his artistic output. Despite these personal challenges, he continued to make bold and defiant gestures. In June 1870, he was offered the Legion of Honor, the highest French order of merit for military and civil achievements, originally established by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802. Courbet rejected the honor, asserting that art did not require the official approval of the state. This act exemplified his lifelong rebelliousness and refusal to conform to institutional authority, a stance consistent with his earlier confrontations with the French Academy over his provocative subject matter. The rejection of the Legion of Honor would ultimately contribute to his imprisonment and subsequent exile. During the 1860s, Courbet concentrated on erotic nudes, hunting scenes, landscapes, and seascapes. His treatment of the nude challenged contemporary norms and remains provocative to this day. The most notorious example, Origin of the World, 1866, depicts a woman's lower torso and open thighs, stripping away classical artifice and directing the viewer to confront the intimate realities of female anatomy. Such frank representation foreshadowed the raw eroticism of early 20th century painters, including Egon Schiele. Similarly, Courbet's late seascapes and landscapes, executed with thick tactile brushstrokes, emphasized the materiality of paint and the physical presence of water and terrain, anticipating innovations later explored by the Impressionists. These works demonstrate his capacity to subvert academic classicism while advancing a distinctly realist vision. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870-1871 precipitated the collapse of the Second Empire and the proclamation of the Third Republic. Amid the ensuing turmoil, the Paris Commune was established on the 18th March 1871. Courbet, elected president of the Artists' Federation, assumed responsibility for reopening museums and organizing the annual Salon. Actively engaged in the Commune's revolutionary activities, he prioritized the protection of major public monuments, including the Sèvres porcelain factory and the palace at Fontainebleau, at a time when Paris was under sustained bombardment. Alarmed by the Commune's excesses, he resigned on 2 May 1871. The Commune voted to destroy the Place Vendôme column, a monument commemorating Napoleon Bonaparte's Grand Army, which was demolished on the 16th of May. 12 days later, with the Commune crushed by the army of Versailles, Courbet became a scapegoat for the act. Arrested on 7th of June, he faced a military court on charges of instigating the demolition despite having played no direct role. Sentenced to 6 months in prison and subjected to a substantial fine, Courbet was initially confined at Sainte-Pélagie prison before being transferred to a clinic due to illness. His incarceration, marked by harsh treatment and deprivation of painting materials, further exacerbated his declining health and alcoholism, which had progressed to liver disease. Upon release, Courbet returned to Ornans to recuperate, only to confront renewed persecution. In 1873, he was ordered to finance the reconstruction of the Place Vendôme column, amounting to 323,000 francs, payable in annual installments of 10,000 francs. Unable to comply, he defied the judgment and left France for Switzerland in July 1873, never to return. His personal property and artworks were seized, and he was additionally fined 500,000 gold francs. In exile, Courbet continued to paint, settling in Fleurier and devoting himself to still-life compositions of flowers and fruit. These works, characterized by meticulous attention to color, form, and texture, provided a means of aesthetic refuge from the political and personal turmoil he had endured. Notable among these is a large still life of fruits, measuring 63 x 73 centimeter, now held at the Norton Simon Foundation, Pasadena. A surviving letter from his sister Zoe in 1872 describes the painting as a large painting of a dozen pears, apples, heaped pleasantly on a table. Gustave is enchanted with it. He says that he never achieved such gracious effects of color. Through such compositions, Courbet explored the sensuality of natural forms, creating images of vitality and beauty in stark contrast to the hardships of his final years. Courbet never married, often citing his devotion to art as incompatible with domestic life. In 1872, he proposed to a young woman, promising in a letter that acceptance would make her envied across France. The proposal was refused, and he remained a lifelong bachelor. Later, he relocated to Vevey and then La Tour de Pales, acquiring an inn named Bonport, safe arrival, where he remained from 1874 until his death from liver disease, exacerbated by heavy drinking, in December 1877 at the age of 58. His remains were interred in the cemetery of Ornans. Courbet's legacy has continued to grow posthumously. He is celebrated as a pioneering exponent of realism and a central figure in the avant-garde, whose uncompromising commitment to depicting life truthfully reshaped modern art. His approach, often described as a democratic eye, revolutionized Western art by insisting on the depiction of ordinary people and natural forms with unflinching accuracy. Courbet's innovations paved the way for subsequent modern movements, including Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. Manet, Monet, Renoir, and others engaged directly with Courbet and were profoundly influenced by both his persona and his paintings. Moreover, Courbet's visceral application of paint and emphasis on materiality opened paths for figure and landscape painters of the 20th century, such as Willem de Kooning, Fairfield Porter, Lucian Freud, and the Bay Area figurative painters. His monumental canvases of everyday life, as well as his later still lifes, exemplify the enduring significance of his realist philosophy and his ability to reconcile technical mastery with a vivid representation of lived experience. Through these achievements, Courbet challenged prevailing artistic conventions, rejected romantic idealization, and established a legacy that continues to inspire successive generations of artists worldwide.